Okay, this is a video for a Poulan. My model happens to be a PP4218, but I'm sure this applies to any of the saws that have like a cable style trigger rather than a hard wire trigger assembly. So basically what it was doing is when I was pulling it, the trigger disappeared into the handle, and I couldn't find any video about this, so I decided, after I figured out what was going on and wasted my time and money on it, I'm going to go ahead and show you what exactly it was and why you most likely don't need to order a part. I mean, there could be some circumstances maybe your cable is actually broken, but I'll show you exactly why that trigger disappeared and didn't come back, why there's no tension on it. So basically, when I opened up this handle, there was 2 Torx head screws. Just remove those 2 and take this handle off. My first thinking that it would be somehow this spring that would give some downward tension on this trigger, but actually that spring is mostly focused on this mechanism for the trigger lock, so it's not that. So first I would recommend maybe taking a picture, and so you know how to get this back together, but I'll show you afterward. So basically I remove this spring and that trigger lock mechanism. Next I remove this trigger itself and detach it. You have to turn it over a little bit and pull it out from that cable mechanism. So the first thing I was thinking was that there's just no tension on this, so I assumed it was stretched or something of that nature. So now I took the cover off. You have to lock the brake mechanism, take 3 Torx head screws here, here, and here, and remove this cover. So now that that cover is off, you remove the air filter cover, remove the air filter, and you can see where that cable connects. So I went through the trouble to change out this whole mechanism, which was mistaken. If you order this air filter, it comes with that cable, so I assumed it was stretched or something of that nature. And really what gives the cable tension is this butterfly on the carburetor is always in this position here. So when you pull on the trigger, you're pulling this, and then this thing itself is spring loaded, so that's going to pull the trigger, that's going to pull that cable back and pull that trigger back down for you. But so anyways, if you end up having to do that, I had to remove this. These are 2 5/16. There's a Torx head. I'm not sure if you can get a light on that. There's a Torx head in there. I took pictures of this stopping mechanism and the 2 plugs that are on that, and then you can just remove that mechanism. I changed this whole assembly, which was unnecessary. Now to get to the actual problem, which was way more simple, this cable just has a tendency to pop up out of here. That little piece of plastic on the cable is really important because it has to be pushed down into that groove there. And if you don't get it pushed into that groove so that this cable is pulling against that tube, that's where you lose your trigger tension. So then when you reassemble it, once you feed that cable back into that trigger, and as long as there's a downward pressure on this, which for one, this trigger mechanism kind of holds that cable down there, but secondly, once you put this handle back on, there's a tab on the back side of this handle right there that fits down over top of this, and it'll hold that cable in place too. So that cable coming up out of that channel right there, that's where you lose your tension on your trigger, because as soon as you have that held back down in there, that butterfly is spring loaded on the carburetor, so that pulls that trigger right back down. So as you can see, I don't have that other spring, that's not part of it at all. And if I just hold on to this and don't let that piece of tubing come up out of that channel, you can see that I'll show you the view. When you pull on this, you're getting that throttle pull, and then as soon as you let off of it, that springs back and pulls your cable out, and that drops your trigger back down. So it's that simple, but it just seemed like nobody had a video on YouTube about that actual problem, that trigger disappearing on a Poulan chainsaw. So now that I put it back together, the first thing you put back on, you take that cam there for the lock mechanism, you put that in place, and then this spring is very simple. You put it around that shaft, and see there's little grooves there that fits into. Then you latch the spring back over top into there's 2 little tabs here that kind of hold that spring in there, and then that's down in that channel, so now you got that spring action back happening again. And then the last thing is to just carefully put the handle down over here and make sure that, you know, when you squeeze it on, it clicks in, and that, you know, that mechanism on the back, or that tab on the back, will push down there. So then you just tighten up those 2 Torx heads. So now that I tightened up those screws, you'll see when I press the trigger, it just immediately bounces back. And also when I press it, I'm getting the appropriate reaction inside at the throttle where the hooks up to the carburetor. So that's it. It was actually, I hope that just saved somebody. I mean, it wasn't real expensive. I spent about 15 bucks or something like that to get an OEM cable here, but I could have had it fixed on the same day if I would have, you know, kind of just dove into it deeper on day one, rather than I just looked at it. I assumed the cable had to be somehow broken or stretched or something like that, so I just went ahead and ordered that assembly. And you know, I did a lot of research after I didn't quite get it figured out, and I couldn't find a video that kind of lined up with this, so then I just went ahead and made one for you. So good luck with that. Hope it helps.